The Great Hall of the Galactic Council stretched for miles under its crystal dome. Representatives from 47 different species sat in their assigned seats, each group reflecting the ancient hierarchy that had governed the galaxy for over 2,000 years. At the highest level sat the Zeltharians, their blue-scaled bodies gleaming under the artificial suns. Below them, the insectoid Vorthans clicked their mandibles in approval. The rock-like granite people remained silent as always, and at the very bottom, in the smallest section, sat the humans. Ambassador Sarah Chen kept her face calm as Council Leader Zethkar spoke. His voice boomed through the hall, each word carrying the weight of absolute authority. Resolution 847 Delta has been approved by the required majority, he announced. The species designation of Earth humans is hereby changed from Level 2 civilization to Level 3. All associated rights and privileges are suspended immediately. Sarah felt her heart sink, but she did not let it show. Around her, the other human delegates remained equally still. They had expected this day would come, but it still hurt to hear it made official. Level 3 meant they were now considered a minor species. They would lose access to the main trade routes. Their research teams would be removed from joint projects. Their colonies in disputed space would lose protection. Furthermore, Zethkar continued, all human vessels must now register their movements through proper channels. Human settlements in Sectors 7 through 15 must apply for new permits within 60 days. Any failure to comply will result in immediate expulsion from Council space. The other species in the hall made various sounds of approval. Some clicked, others hummed, and a few released chemical signals that the translation systems couldn't convert to words. But the message was clear. They agreed with this decision. Sarah stood slowly. The hall fell silent as all eyes turned to her small figure. She was barely 5 feet tall, tiny compared to most other species. Her brown skin and black hair marked her as clearly human. Some of the alien representatives looked at her with barely hidden disgust. Others seemed amused that such a small creature would dare to speak. Council Leader Zethkar, Sarah said, her voice carrying clearly through the hall. We understand the Council's position. Humanity respects the democratic process and accepts this decision. We ask only for reasonable time to comply with the new regulations. Zethkar's scales shifted color slightly, which meant he was surprised. He had expected anger, protests, or at least some argument. Instead, the human ambassador was being perfectly polite and reasonable. You have 30 days to begin compliance, he said. This session is closed. As the other representatives began to file out, many of them chatting about trade deals and research projects, Sarah gathered her papers. The other human delegates said nothing. They had discussed this possibility many times in private meetings. They knew what needed to be done. 3 days later, the first human ships began leaving the major space stations. The departures were quiet and orderly. Human families packed their belongings, said polite goodbyes to their alien neighbors, and boarded transport vessels. Human researchers finished their current experiments, filed their final reports, and transferred their positions to other species. Human traders completed their existing contracts and declined to negotiate new ones. Dr. James Wright was one of the first to leave. He had spent 15 years working at the Andromedan Research Station, studying quantum mechanics alongside Vorthan scientists. His departure surprised his colleagues, especially Dr. Klicktar, who had worked with him for over a decade. But Dr. Wright, Klicktar said, his insect-like head tilting in confusion, your research is not complete. The quantum field experiments need at least 2 more years. James packed his instruments carefully into storage containers. I'm sorry, Klicktar. Under the new regulations, humans can only participate in Level 3 research projects. Quantum field studies are Level 1. I no longer qualify. But that is ridiculous, Klicktar protested. You discovered the resonance patterns that made our current progress possible. Without your insights about random variables, we cannot continue. James smiled sadly. You'll figure it out. You're much more intelligent than humans. That's what the Council determined. Similar conversations were happening across the galaxy. Human engineers left mining operations. Human doctors transferred their patients to other medical staff, and human teachers found replacements for their classes. In every case, they were polite, helpful, and efficient. They wrote detailed handover reports, trained their replacements as much as possible, and answered all questions with patience. Captain Maria Santos commanded one of the last human cargo ships to leave the primary trade hub at Nexus Station. As her ship undocked, she received a communication from Station Administrator Korth 9, a member of the mechanical assembled species. Captain Santos, Korth 9's electronic voice crackled through the speakers. Your departure creates a significant gap in our shipping schedule. Human vessels handle 37% of our medium-range cargo runs. How should we manage this reduction in capacity? Maria checked her navigation charts one final time. I suggest contacting the Zeltharian Transport Guild. They have expressed interest in expanding their operations. You might also try the Granite People's hauling cooperatives, but neither species operates with your efficiency ratings, Korth 9 replied. Human ships complete routes 17% faster than the galactic average, with 23% fewer incidents. I'm sure they'll adapt, Maria said politely. They have superior technology. Good luck, Administrator. As her ship jumped to hyperspace, Maria didn't look back at the massive station that had been her second home for 8 years. Behind her, Nexus Station continued its operations. But already the carefully orchestrated dance of incoming and outgoing ships was showing small delays and confusion. The pattern repeated across hundreds of systems. Humans left their positions, their homes, their research projects, and their friends. They did it without protests, without anger, and without making demands. They simply packed up and left exactly as the Council had ordered. Most of the alien species barely noticed. Humans had always been quiet members of galactic society. They didn't make grand speeches or demand attention. They just worked steadily at whatever jobs they were given, asked good questions during meetings, and somehow always seemed to be around when problems needed solving. 3 weeks after the first departures began, nearly 80% of humans had left their positions in Council space. The remainder were finishing up essential tasks or waiting for transport. Sarah Chen was among the last to leave. She spent her final days at the Council headquarters organizing files, transferring responsibilities, and writing detailed reports about ongoing diplomatic situations. On her last day, she met with Zethkar one final time. The Zeltharian leader seemed slightly uncomfortable, though it was hard to tell with his species. Ambassador Chen, he said, your people have been remarkably cooperative during this transition. The Council appreciates humanity's mature response to our decision. Sarah nodded politely. We understand that the Council must do what it believes is best for galactic stability. We hold no grudges. And where will your people go now? Zethkar asked, his curiosity obvious. We have several options under consideration, Sarah replied diplomatically. Humanity is adaptable. We'll find our place somewhere. Perhaps, Zethkar said slowly. If your species continues to show this level of maturity, the Council might reconsider your status in the future, say in 50 or 60 years. Sarah smiled the same polite smile she had worn throughout the entire process. That's very kind of you to suggest, Council Leader. We'll certainly keep that in mind. As Sarah's shuttle departed from the Council station, she looked out at the vast structure that had been the center of galactic government for millennia. Soon it would continue its work without any human presence at all. The 46 remaining species would handle all the tasks that humans had quietly performed for over a century. Sarah wasn't angry. None of the humans were angry. They had learned long ago that anger was rarely useful in politics. Instead, they felt something else. A quiet disappointment that their former colleagues and friends had valued hierarchy over cooperation, pride over practicality. But humans were indeed adaptable, just as Sarah had said. They would find their place somewhere else. The galaxy was vast, and there were always new frontiers to explore, new challenges to face, and new friends to make. As her shuttle jumped to hyperspace, carrying her toward an uncertain but hopeful future, Sarah wondered how long it would take the Council to notice what they had lost. She suspected it would be longer than most people expected, but shorter than the Council would want. 3 months had passed since the last human ship disappeared from Council space. For most of the 46 remaining species, life continued exactly as it had before. Trade flowed between systems, research projects advanced, and the great machinery of galactic civilization kept turning. The absence of humans was barely noticed at the highest levels of government and society. But in the details, in the small spaces between the grand plans and noble declarations, things were starting to change. Administrator Korth 9 stood in the control center of Nexus Station, watching the massive display that showed all incoming and outgoing traffic. Red warning symbols blinked across multiple shipping lanes. indicating delays and bottlenecks that would have been unthinkable just 4 months ago. Status report, he requested from his assistant, a young Vorthan named Tiklar. 37 ships are behind schedule on the Outer Rim route, Tiklar reported, his mandibles clicking nervously. The Zeltharian Transport Guild is experiencing equipment failures on 6 vessels. The Granite People's Cooperative has suspended operations on the mid-core run due to navigation disputes. Korth 9 processed this information through his mechanical mind. The numbers didn't make sense. Ship traffic was actually down by 12% since the humans left, so delays should have decreased, not increased. Yet somehow the entire system was becoming less efficient. What about the emergency backup protocols? He asked. That's part of the problem, Tiklar admitted. The backup systems were designed and maintained by human engineers. We can operate them, but we don't fully understand how they work. When problems arise, we cannot quickly adapt the protocols to new situations. On the other side of the galaxy, Dr. Kliktar was facing his own puzzles. The quantum field experiments at Andromedan Research Station had ground to a complete halt. Without Dr. Wright's insights about random variables and unexpected system behaviors, the research team could not make any progress. The mathematics are perfect, complained Dr. Senthvar, a brilliant Vorthan physicist. The equipment functions exactly as designed. The energy fields behave precisely as our models predict, yet we achieve no breakthrough results. Dr. Kliktar reviewed their data for the 100th time. Everything was indeed perfect, which was exactly the problem. Dr. Wright had always asked strange questions about what would happen if something went wrong, if a component failed, or if random factors interfered with their carefully controlled experiments. Those questions had seemed pointless at the time, even primitive. But somehow those pointless questions had led to their greatest discoveries. Perhaps we should try introducing deliberate errors into the system, suggested Dr. Lynn Torth, another team member. That would be illogical, Dr. Senthvar replied immediately. Errors reduce precision and contaminate results. But Dr. Wright always said that errors could reveal hidden properties of the systems we study, Dr. Kliktar mused. He called it productive failure, and claimed that humans learned more from mistakes than from successes. The team exchanged confused looks. This concept made no sense to their highly logical minds, but they could not argue with the results Dr. Wright had achieved. Meanwhile, at the Kepler 442b mining operation, Chief Engineer Borthkel was dealing with an increasingly serious crisis. The ancient mining equipment, left behind by a long-vanished species called the predecessors, had been operating smoothly for decades under the care of human engineers. But now, without their constant attention and improvised repairs, the machinery was beginning to fail. The primary excavator has shut down again, reported his assistant. That's the 4th time this week. Borthkel, a massive member of the Granite people whose body resembled living stone, rumbled his frustration. What does the diagnostic system indicate? All systems show green. No errors detected. But the excavator will not respond to commands. This was the most frustrating part. The predecessor technology was far more advanced than anything the current galactic species could build, but it was also completely alien in its design principles. The human engineers had somehow developed an intuitive understanding of how to keep it working, using what they called jury-rigged solutions and creative maintenance. They had tried to teach these methods to other species, but their approaches seemed to be based more on instinct and experimentation than on logical analysis. Perhaps we should attempt the percussive maintenance technique that Engineer Martinez demonstrated, suggested the assistant. Borthkel considered this. The human engineer had indeed fixed several major problems by hitting specific parts of the machinery with a specially designed hammer. The technique had no theoretical basis and violated all principles of proper equipment care, yet it had worked consistently. Very well, Borthkel rumbled. Retrieve the human maintenance tools from storage. As he lumbered toward the excavator, carrying a hammer that seemed ridiculously small in his massive stone hands, Borthkel wondered why his people's advanced engineering knowledge was useless against these ancient machines, while humans with their primitive methods had kept everything running smoothly. The problems were not limited to technical systems. Diplomatic tensions were rising throughout the galaxy as well. Ambassador Lithcor of the Ethereal Collective found herself struggling with a particularly difficult first contact situation. A newly discovered species called the harmony singers communicated primarily through complex musical patterns, and initial meetings had gone badly. They consider our translation attempts to be aggressive and insulting, she reported to the council during an emergency session. Every protocol we follow seems to make them more hostile. Perhaps we should apply more advanced linguistic analysis, suggested council leader Zeth Carr. Our computers can decode any communication pattern. We have tried that approach, Lithcor replied. Our analyses are perfect, but somehow we are missing something essential about their culture. They keep asking for the bridge builders and the harmony makers. We believe they are referring to humans. Uncomfortable silence fell over the council chamber. Humans had handled most first contact situations for the past century, and their success rate was remarkably high. They seemed to have a unique ability to find common ground with completely alien species, even when communication was nearly impossible. Surely our superior intellects can manage a simple first contact situation, declared Councillor Vorth Prime of the Vorthan delegation. Humans were merely adequate at diplomacy, nothing more. But privately, many council members were beginning to worry. Humans had made difficult negotiations look easy, had solved technical problems that stumped more advanced species, and had kept countless small systems running smoothly. Now that they were gone, the true scope of their contributions was becoming apparent. At the Central Medical Research Facility, Dr. Neth Quinn was dealing with the most serious problem of all. A strange plague had begun spreading through the core worlds, affecting multiple species. The pathogen was unlike anything in their databases, and their most advanced medical technologies were proving ineffective. The organism adapts to every treatment we attempt, she reported to her research team. It evolves faster than we can develop countermeasures. This should be impossible, insisted Dr. Korthlin, a leading expert in pathogenic organisms. Our adaptive treatment protocols can counter any biological threat. Dr. Neth Quinn reviewed the files from the human medical teams that had worked at the facility. Their approaches had been completely different from standard galactic medicine. Instead of focusing on advanced treatments for diseases, they had emphasized prevention, immune system support, and what they called adaptive resilience. Their methods had seemed primitive and inefficient, but somehow they had achieved consistently better health outcomes for their patients. The human medical files mentioned something called preparing for unknown threats, she said slowly. They apparently spent considerable time developing treatments for diseases that did not yet exist. That seems wasteful and illogical, Dr. Korthlin replied. Why treat illnesses that might never occur? Perhaps, Dr. Neth Quinn said quietly, because illnesses like this one eventually do occur. As reports of delays, failures, and problems flowed into the council chambers from across the galaxy, a few members began to voice quiet concerns, but the majority dismissed these issues as temporary adjustments. The galaxy had survived for millennia before humans arrived, and it would continue long after they were forgotten. Council leader Zeth Carr reviewed the situation reports with growing unease, but he kept his doubts to himself. The council had made its decision based on careful analysis and democratic principles. They could not admit error so soon, especially not over a species as minor as humans. Still, as he looked at the growing list of problems, Zeth Carr couldn't help but wonder if they had made a mistake. But surely, their superior technology and intellect would soon solve these temporary difficulties. After all, humans had been the least advanced species in the council. How important could they really have been? 6 months after the human departure, the word crisis was being whispered in the halls of the Galactic Council for the first time in over 3 centuries. What had started as minor inconveniences and technical glitches had grown into system-wide failures that threatened the very foundation of galactic civilization. The mining operation on Kepler 442b had collapsed completely. Chief Engineer Borth Kell stood in the silent excavation chambers, surrounded by billions of credits worth of ancient predecessor machinery that no longer responded to any commands. His stone-like features showed no emotion, but inside he felt a deep sense of failure. The percussive maintenance technique worked for exactly 12 days, he reported to the council via subspace communication. After that, the machinery began shutting down in sequence. We have attempted every diagnostic procedure, every repair protocol and every maintenance technique in our databases. Nothing works. The economic impact was staggering. Kepler 442b provided rare minerals essential for hyperspace navigation systems. Without these materials, shipbuilding across the galaxy would grind to a halt within months. Alternative sources existed, but they would take years to develop and would cost 10 times as much to extract. How did the human engineers maintain these systems for so long? Demanded Counselor Vorth Prime during the emergency session. Borth-Kell's response was deeply troubling. They did not follow any standard procedures. They claimed to listen to the machines and feel when something was wrong. They used tools and techniques that violated all engineering principles, yet somehow achieved perfect operational records. We have their written reports, but they describe their methods in terms we cannot understand. The reports were indeed puzzling. Human engineers wrote about machine moods and equipment personality. They described giving machines rest periods and treating them with respect. Most confusing of all, they had apparently modified the predecessor technology extensively, but their modifications seemed random and illogical. Dr. Klicktar had discovered similar problems at the research stations. The humans did not simply operate our equipment, he reported from Andromedan Station. They changed it in subtle ways that we are only now beginning to understand. They added redundant systems, backup protocols, and what they called failure-safe mechanisms. When we removed these additions as inefficient, our entire research capability collapsed. The quantum field experiments were not the only casualty. Across the galaxy, research projects that had run smoothly for decades were failing as scientists discovered how much they had relied on human contributions. The humans had not just followed orders or operated equipment. They had quietly improved every system they touched. But the most serious crisis was the plague. Dr. Nethquin's research team had not only failed to develop a cure, they had watched helplessly as the pathogen spread to 47 different worlds. Traditional galactic medicine was completely ineffective against an organism that seemed to evolve new defenses faster than treatments could be developed. We need to understand the human medical approaches, Dr. Nethquin announced during a medical emergency conference. Their files describe methods for dealing with exactly this type of adaptive pathogen. Their methods are primitive, protested Dr. Korthlin. They rely on the biological immune systems of patients, rather than advanced medical technology. This cannot be effective against a serious threat. Yet their hospital records show consistently better outcomes, Dr. Nethquin replied. Human patients recovered from illnesses that our treatments could not cure. They prevented diseases that our sensors could not detect. They somehow prepared their immune systems to fight threats that had not yet appeared. The debate raged for hours, but the facts were undeniable. Human medical techniques, which had seemed inefficient and unscientific, had achieved results that galactic medicine could not match. Now, faced with a plague that threatened all civilized worlds, those primitive methods might be their only hope. The crisis deepened when the first contact situation with the Harmony Singers escalated into open conflict. Ambassador Lithcor's diplomatic team had not only failed to establish communication, they had somehow convinced the new species that the Galactic Council was hostile and dangerous. They have allied themselves with 3 other species in their region, she reported grimly. Together, they have formed what they call a defense coalition against galactic expansion. They claim that we are discord makers and harmony breakers who bring chaos wherever we go. The military implications were serious, but the diplomatic damage was worse. For the first time in centuries, the galaxy faced the possibility of organized resistance to Council authority. Other species were beginning to question whether galactic civilization was as beneficial as the Council claimed. The Harmony Singers keep asking about the Peace Weavers and Understanding Bringers, Ambassador Lithcor continued. Our analysts believe they are referring to humans. Apparently, the humans had made contact with this species over a year ago and had established positive relationships. Council leader Zethkar's scales darkened with worry. Are you saying that humans were conducting unauthorized diplomatic missions? Not unauthorized, Lithcor replied carefully. The humans had filed proper exploration reports, but they were classified as routine survey missions. No one paid attention because humans were considered unimportant. The revelation was shocking. While the Council had been dismissing humans as minor contributors to galactic society, they had apparently been building relationships throughout unexplored space. The implications were staggering. Transportation networks were also failing across the galaxy. Without human logistics coordination, the carefully balanced flow of goods and services was breaking down. Ships waited days for loading permits that used to be processed in hours. Cargo sat in warehouses while transport vessels remained empty due to scheduling conflicts. The legendary efficiency of galactic commerce was becoming a memory. Captain Torth Vel, a Zeltharian transport commander, summed up the problem during a meeting of shipping executives. The humans seemed to do nothing but paperwork and ask questions about scheduling. We thought they were inefficient bureaucrats. Now we realized they were the only ones who understood how all the pieces fit together. The questions humans had asked, seemingly pointless inquiries about backup plans, alternative routes, and contingency procedures, had apparently been essential to maintaining system-wide efficiency. Without those unnecessary backup systems and redundant protocols, the entire network was vulnerable to any disruption. Energy distribution was another growing concern. The galactic power grid had been designed by the most brilliant minds of dozens of species, but it was maintained by human technicians who had somehow kept it running smoothly despite its inherent instabilities. Without their constant attention and improvised solutions, power outages were becoming common across civilized space. The humans modified our power distribution systems extensively, reported Chief Engineer Nalthkor from the Central Energy Authority. They added thousands of minor components that our original designs did not include. When we attempted to remove these additions as unnecessary complications, grid stability decreased dramatically. The modifications were puzzling. Human engineers had installed simple mechanical switches alongside advanced energy conduits, added manual override controls to automated systems, and created physical backups for digital processes. None of these additions made sense from an engineering perspective. Yet removing them caused immediate system failures. As reports of cascading failures reached the council chambers, the magnitude of their miscalculation became impossible to ignore. Humans had not been minor contributors to galactic civilization. They had been the foundation that held everything together. We must contact the humans immediately, declared Counselor Yithmar of the Ethereal Collective. These problems are beyond our ability to solve quickly. We need their expertise. Absolutely not, Zethkar replied firmly. The Council cannot admit error so soon after making a democratic decision. It would undermine our authority and destabilize government across the galaxy. But the alternative is systemic collapse, Counselor Yithmar protested. Pride is less important than survival. The debate that followed was intense but brief. Despite the growing crisis, the majority of council members voted to continue attempting solutions without human assistance. They would not admit that they had made a mistake about such a minor species. But privately, many were beginning to realize the truth. Humans had not been the least important members of galactic civilization. They had been the most important, the ones who made everything else possible. And now they were gone, leaving behind systems and structures that no one else fully understood. As the 6th month ended and the 7th began, the crisis continued to deepen. The proud and ancient Galactic Council, which had governed successfully for millennia, was learning a harsh lesson about the difference between intelligence and wisdom, between advancement and adaptability. The humans had tried to warn them in their quiet, polite way. They had demonstrated the value of redundancy, flexibility, and preparation for unexpected problems. But the Council had dismissed these approaches as primitive and inefficient. Now, as galactic civilization trembled on the edge of collapse, those primitive the emergency session of the Galactic Council had been running for 18 hours straight. In the Great Hall where representatives had once debated policy with calm dignity, panic was beginning to show. The crisis had reached a point where even the most prideful council members could no longer deny the scope of their mistake. The plague has now reached 63 worlds, Dr. Nethquin reported, her voice tight with exhaustion. Our latest estimates suggest that without effective treatment, we could see population losses of 30 to 40% across affected systems. The pathogen continues to evolve faster than our medical technology can adapt. Council leader Zethkar listened to the report with growing dread. Each new piece of information painted a darker picture of galactic civilization's future. The plague was just one of dozens of cascading failures that threatened their entire way of life. "What about the human medical files?" asked Counselor Yithmar. "Have your teams made progress understanding their treatment methods?" "We have tried," Dr. Nethquin replied, "but human medicine was based on principles that we cannot easily duplicate. They worked with biological systems rather than against them. They prepared for problems that had not yet occurred. They used what they called adaptive immunity strategies that seemed to require extensive knowledge of how different species' immune systems actually function, not just how they should function according to theory. The most frustrating part was that human medical facilities had been dealing with adaptive pathogens for years. Their records showed successful treatment of several organisms that exhibited similar evolutionary characteristics. But their methods relied on techniques and medicines that other species had dismissed as inefficient or unscientific. "We need the humans back," Dr. Nethquin said quietly. "This plague will destroy galactic civilization if we cannot develop effective treatments within the next few months." Similar reports came from every sector of society. The transportation crisis had worsened to the point where some systems were becoming isolated. Without human logistics coordination, the complex web of interdependencies that supported galactic commerce was unraveling. "Food shipments to the outer colonies are 40 days behind schedule," reported Administrator Korth 9 via holographic projection. "Medical supplies to the core worlds are delayed indefinitely due to routing conflicts. Raw materials essential for ship construction are sitting in warehouses, while factories shut down for lack of components." The breakdown was not due to any single catastrophic failure. Instead, thousands of small inefficiencies and minor problems were accumulating into system-wide paralysis. The humans had somehow been preventing these problems through their redundant planning and unnecessary backup protocols. Energy distribution had become critically unstable. Rolling blackouts were affecting major population centers as the power grid struggled to maintain balance without human technicians. The brilliant automated systems designed by advanced alien minds could not adapt to unexpected variations and equipment failures the way human engineers had. "We have located some of the human modifications to our power systems," reported Chief Engineer Nalthkor. "They appear to have created what they called graceful degradation protocols. When parts of the system fail, instead of triggering cascade failures, the network automatically reroutes power through backup pathways that maintain essential services." "Can we replicate these protocols?" asked Zethkar. "We are trying," Nalthkor replied, "but the human approach required constant monitoring and adjustment. They made thousands of minor modifications daily, responding to changing conditions faster than our automated systems can process. They somehow predicted problems and prevented them before they occurred. The research crisis had expanded beyond simple project delays. Entire fields of scientific inquiry were stagnating as researchers discovered how much they had relied on human insights and methodologies. The humans had not just operated equipment or followed protocols. They had asked the right questions and explored unexpected possibilities. Human researchers contributed to 93% of our major breakthroughs over the past 50 years, Dr. Kliktar reported from Andromedan Station. They did not always lead the projects, but their questions and suggestions guided the research in directions that proved fruitful. Without their input, we can make our experiments work perfectly, but we cannot make them reveal new knowledge. The diplomatic situation was becoming equally serious. The conflict with the Harmony Singers had spread as other species questioned the Council's authority and competence. 3 more newly contacted civilizations had refused to establish formal relations, claiming that the Council brought disorder and separation rather than peace and prosperity. Intelligence reports suggest that humans had established positive contact with at least 15 species in unexplored regions, Ambassador Lithkor informed the Council. These species view humans as trustworthy mediators, and the Council as aggressive expansionists. They are forming cooperative alliances that specifically exclude Council participation. The revelation that humans had been conducting extensive diplomatic missions in unexplored space was shocking. While the Council had dismissed them as unimportant, humans had apparently been building relationships throughout the galaxy. Now those relationships were being used to exclude the Council from entire regions of space. How did we miss this? demanded Counselor Vorth Prime. "How could such a minor species conduct major diplomatic operations without our knowledge?" "Because we classified their activities as unimportant," Lithcor replied. "Human exploration reports were filed in the routine survey database. No one reviewed them carefully because human activities were considered irrelevant to major policy decisions." The mining crisis had triggered a cascade of economic problems that threatened the foundation of galactic industry. Without the rare minerals from Kepler 442b, shipyards across the galaxy were beginning to shut down. Alternative sources would take years to develop, and the economic disruption was already affecting millions of workers. "The human engineering files describe their maintenance techniques in detail," reported Chief Engineer Borth Kell, "but the instructions are incomprehensible. They write about listening to machine sounds, feeling vibrations through the floor, and sensing when equipment is becoming unstable. These are not measurable phenomena." The files also revealed that human engineers had made extensive modifications to the predecessor machinery. They had added monitoring systems that tracked variables no other species had considered important. They had created backup systems for critical components. Most puzzling of all, they had apparently taught the machines to communicate with them in ways that violated all known principles of artificial intelligence. "The machines respond to human vocal patterns and physical gestures," Borthkell continued. "We have attempted to duplicate these interactions, but the equipment remains unresponsive. It appears that the humans developed some form of symbiotic relationship with the predecessor technology." As the Council struggled with these mounting crises, pressure was building for immediate action. Several member species had begun demanding that the Council contact the humans and request their return. Others argued that admitting error would damage the Council's authority permanently. "We must prioritize galactic stability over political considerations," declared Councillor Yithmar. "If human expertise can solve these problems, we have a moral obligation to seek their assistance, regardless of the political consequences. The Council cannot simply reverse a democratic decision because of temporary difficulties," Zethkar replied firmly. "We have governed successfully for millennia. These problems will be solved through superior intellect and advanced technology, not by crawling back to a species we rightfully determined to be inferior." The debate that followed was the most intense in Council history. Ancient alliances were strained as species began to blame each other for the current crisis. Some argued that humans had been deliberately sabotaging galactic systems, preparing for the moment when they would be expelled. Others maintained that the crisis was evidence of how dependent they had become on primitive methods. But beneath the political arguments, a growing number of Council members were reaching an uncomfortable conclusion. Humans had not been the least advanced species in galactic civilization. They had been the most essential. Their primitive methods had been the foundation that allowed advanced alien technology to function reliably. Their inefficient approaches had been the flexibility that kept rigid systems from breaking under stress. "We need to find them," Councillor Yithmar said during a private meeting of moderate Council members. "Politics aside, galactic civilization will not survive without human expertise. We must locate their new colonies and negotiate their return." "Even if we wanted to," replied Councillor Linthvar of the Silicon Collective, "how would we find them? Our long-range sensors show no trace of human settlements. They have effectively vanished." This was perhaps the most troubling aspect of the entire situation. The humans had not simply left Council space. They had disappeared completely. No distress signals, no communication attempts, no trace of their colonies or fleets. 1 year had passed since the last human ship had departed from Council space. The emergency session had become a permanent crisis council, meeting daily to address the cascading failures that continued to spread across galactic civilization. The Great Hall, once a symbol of order and dignity, now felt like a war room where desperate leaders fought against the collapse of everything they had built. The plague had reached 89 worlds. Food distribution networks had collapsed in 12 sectors. Power grids were failing on a weekly basis. The mining crisis had triggered a depression that affected every aspect of galactic commerce. Diplomatic relations with newly contacted species had deteriorated to the point where some regions of space were effectively closed to Council vessels. But it was the long-range sensor reports that finally broke the council's stubborn pride. Impossible, whispered Dr. Thekvor, the chief astronomer, as he stared at the data streaming across his displays. The readings must be wrong. Run the analysis again, ordered council leader Zethkar, though his voice carried none of its former authority. The past year had aged him visibly, his once bright scales now dull with stress and exhaustion. The analysis confirmed what the initial scans had shown. Deep in the unexplored regions beyond the galactic rim, sensors had detected clear signs of advanced civilization. Massive energy signatures, organized space traffic, and what appeared to be thriving industrial activities across multiple star systems. The technology patterns are familiar, but enhanced, Dr. Thekvor reported. We're seeing human ship designs but modified with components we don't recognize. Energy outputs are 30% higher than anything in our databases. And the activity levels suggest a population far larger than Earth's pre-Exodus numbers. How many star systems? Asked Counselor Yithmar. At least 47, Dr. Thekvor replied. Possibly more. Our sensors can only detect the largest energy sources at this distance. There could be hundreds of smaller colonies that we cannot observe. The implications were staggering. In just 1 year, humans had apparently established a civilization that rivaled the Council's core territories. This was impossible according to everything. The Council knew about human capabilities and technology. Perhaps they had prepared for exile more extensively than we realized, suggested Counselor Linthvar quietly. Or perhaps, said Counselor Yithmar, we never understood their true capabilities at all. The breakthrough came 3 days later when the sensor arrays detected an incoming transmission from the human territories. The message was brief, transmitted on an open frequency that any species could intercept, but it was directed specifically at the Galactic Council. The image that appeared on the main display showed a woman who appeared to be in her 50s, with graying hair and kind eyes that showed both wisdom and sadness. She wore a simple uniform that bore no rank insignia, but her presence commanded immediate attention. Greetings, Council Leader Zethkar and representatives of the Galactic Council, she said in perfect galactic standard. I am Dr. Elena Rodriguez, speaking on behalf of the Human Cooperative Alliance. We have received your emergency transmissions and understand that you are experiencing significant difficulties. Zethkar leaned forward, his scales shifting color with a mixture of hope and embarrassment. The Council had indeed been transmitting emergency requests for assistance, though they had not explicitly mentioned humans. They had hoped that some species in unexplored space might offer aid without forcing the Council to admit their mistake. We want you to know, Dr. Rodriguez continued, that humanity bears no resentment toward the Council or its member species. Your decision to reclassify our status was made through democratic processes, and we respected that choice. We have found new homes and new friendships in the regions beyond your territories. The transmission quality was remarkably clear, indicating communication technology more advanced than anything the Council possessed. But it was Dr. Rodriguez's next words that truly shocked the assembled representatives. We also want you to know that you are not alone in the galaxy. The Human Cooperative Alliance now includes 43 species across 78 star systems. We have found many civilizations that share our values of cooperation, mutual assistance, and adaptive problem-solving. Together, we have built something we believe is stronger and more sustainable than traditional hierarchical structures. 43 species. The number hit the Council chamber like a physical blow. In 1 year, humans had somehow formed alliances with more species than the Council had contacted in the past century. The implications for galactic politics were profound. The species in our alliance include several that your exploration teams had contacted but dismissed as unimportant, Dr. Rodriguez continued. The Harmony Singers, for example, are master biotechnicians whose medical knowledge surpasses anything we had previously encountered. The Crystal Mines possess mathematical abilities that have revolutionized our understanding of quantum mechanics. The Flow Riders have developed transportation technologies that make galactic travel safer and more efficient. Each revelation was another knife twist for the Council members. Species they had dismissed as primitive or irrelevant were apparently making breakthrough contributions to human civilization. The Council's method of evaluating species, based on their similarity to existing member civilizations, had caused them to overlook incredible diversity of talents and knowledge. We understand that the Council territories are experiencing Difficulties with plague management, system maintenance, and diplomatic relations, Dr. Rodriguez said. While we cannot return to our former status within Council space, we are prepared to offer assistance on humanitarian grounds. The offer hung in the air like a lifeline. After a year of desperate attempts to solve their problems independently, the Council was being offered help by the species they had exiled. The irony was almost unbearable. Our medical teams have developed treatments for adaptive pathogens using techniques learned from the Harmony Singers, Dr. Rodriguez continued. Our engineers have created maintenance protocols that could stabilize your power grids and transportation networks. Our diplomatic corps could mediate the conflicts that have arisen with species in your border regions. She paused, and for a moment her expression showed the pain that humanity had carried since their exile. But we cannot solve these problems for you. True solutions require understanding, cooperation, and respect for different approaches to common challenges. They require admitting that no single species, no matter how advanced, has all the answers. The transmission ended with coordinates for a neutral star system where Council representatives could meet with Alliance diplomats. The offer was genuine, but it came with an implicit requirement that the Council acknowledge their mistake and change their fundamental approach to galactic governance. The debate that followed was unlike anything in Council history. Ancient prejudices and assumptions were challenged as members confronted the reality of what they had lost. The humans had not been a minor species that happened to be useful. They had been the key to sustainable galactic civilization, and their absence had revealed fundamental flaws in the Council's entire system. We must accept their offer, declared Councillor Yithmar. Galactic civilization is collapsing. Pride is a luxury we can no longer afford. If we admit error so completely, argued Councillor Vorth Prime, we undermine the entire basis of Council authority. Member species will question every decision we have made. Perhaps, replied Councillor Yithmar. That would not be a bad thing. The final vote was close, but pragmatism eventually overcame pride. The Council authorized a diplomatic mission to meet with the Human Cooperative Alliance. Ambassador Lithcor was chosen to lead the delegation, accompanied by experts in medicine, engineering, and diplomacy. The journey to the neutral system took 2 weeks, giving the Council delegation time to study the intelligence reports about human civilization. What they found challenged every assumption they had made about species development and technological progress. The humans had not simply rebuilt their civilization in exile. They had transformed it completely. Working with their alien allies, they had developed new technologies that combined the best aspects of multiple species approaches. Their cities were marvels of cooperative engineering. Their medical facilities treated patients from dozens of different species, and their research institutes pursued knowledge through collaborative investigation rather than competitive hierarchy. Most remarkably, they had solved every problem that was currently plaguing Council space. The adaptive plague that threatened galactic civilization was well understood in Alliance territories, where diverse immune systems and cooperative medical research had produced effective treatments. The maintenance protocols that kept ancient machinery running were standard practice in Alliance facilities. The diplomatic techniques that built trust between radically different species were taught in Alliance schools. When Ambassador Lithcor's ship arrived at the designated coordinates, she found herself facing a space station unlike anything in her experience. The structure clearly incorporated design elements from dozens of different species, creating something that was both functionally elegant and aesthetically beautiful.